This week on Popular Hot Rodding Television, Cam and Dean will explain what a Flathead V8 is and why it's making a comeback in the rodding world. Everything's California cool, from the cars to the owners at the Rat Fink reunion. And why do purists consider this eye-catching 29 Ford a genuine hot rod? Stay tuned and find out.
I bring you these 10 commandments.
Mel Brooks for Presidente.
Absolutely.
Hey, welcome to Popular Hot Rodding Television. I'm Dean Skuza.
And I'm Cameron Evans.
Now, today's show's about nostalgia, so we're going to have to look at the Flathead, or the L-head, as some of you purists like to call it.
Yeah, some do. You know, whether you're building a street rod or a classic truck, some guys don't want to put a late model small block in there. They want a more nostalgic piece, and this would be it.
Now, we're going to show you how they work, actually what they are, and how to hot rod them. So stay tuned. We're going to run the gamut. Now, what are the other 5?
I told you that. Thou shalt not red light.
You go.
Coming up on Popular Hot Rodding Television, Cam and Dean explain why they call them Flathead V8s. And this 29 Ford Rat Rod has got everyone talking.
Hey, welcome back. Now, when you hear the word Flathead, we're referring to the Ford Flathead. Ford Motor Company produced these engines 1932 to 1953. So if you stop and do the math, that's a lot of engines and speaks a lot for the design.
Now, this particular truck is a 1952 Ford F1, and it came with a flathead. 239 cubic inches, on its best day about 85 horsepower. And this particular engine has been converted to a 12-volt electrical system. After all, the old 6 volts were a lot harder to start, Dean.
That's right. Now, at the beginning of the program, we promised we'd tell you what a flathead really is. Take a look at this next segment.
When the famous Ford Flathead V8 debuted in 1932 during the Great Depression, it revolutionized the way V8 engines were produced. In fact, up till then, V8 engines were relatively rare, appearing only in high-priced cars. Why? Because they were expensive, requiring multiple castings and tedious bench assembly. Henry Ford changed all that when he dictated to his engineers that the new Ford V8 would be a single casting, something that was considered impossible at the time. But through sheer force and in a matter of months, Henry drove his engineers to do the impossible. And when the 32 Ford V8 replaced the aging Model A legend was born. The original Flathead displaced 221 cubic inches and produced 65 horsepower. Henry's trademark was simplicity, and the new Flathead was a marvel of simplicity, from its single-block casting, which included the bell housing, to its famous flathead design. Now, why do they call it a flathead? Because the valves are located in the cylinder block alongside the piston, instead of overhead in the cylinder head, allowing the head to be flat in appearance. The flathead is also known as an L-head because the combustion chamber forms an L shape, with the chamber extending over the valves. One advantage of a flathead is the small number of moving parts required to open and close the valves. Drawbacks include poor breathing characteristics by today's standards and limitations on increasing compression ratios. The Flathead V8 powered Fords for 22 years and was replaced by a modern overhead valve design in 1954.
So the throttle sticks, and Herman grabs the back of the roll cage on the slingshot, and they're going back and forth.
That's the one from
motion.
Pomona. That's the one from Pomona.
Yeah.
I was talking about the Dragula episode that they shot at Lions.
Oh,
Because
I
you
never
can see
saw
the bridge
that.
in the background.
I never saw that
See, we got on this because when you think about it, who's the most famous flathead of all but Herman Munster, right?
Fred Gwynn. I mean, I dug him in My Cousin Vinny in that. Did you see that TV ad he
Dude,
did
you
for
are the
linoleum?
king of useless information. Ignore him.
Anyway, let's get back to the real flatheads, the Fords. I don't think any rodders were ever really impressed with performance that these things produced. But what you gotta be impressed with is the engineering and the design of them. It's pretty impressive. I mean, take a look at the block. All one piece, and it incorporates everything into it. I mean, you have your whole valve train, your bell housing, and you know what? The 1932 models, which was the first year it went into production, actually incorporated twin water pumps on the front. So it was its own package, if you will.
Now, this particular bark was built in 1985 in France. I mean, it's available right now through Halibran, and it's a big improvement over the original design. But there's certain things that you really can't improve upon. There are problems with flatheads, like this exhaust port. Like a small block Chevy, where you have a Siamese exhaust ports with two separate ports next to each other, this thing actually shares the same exhaust port. That's why you see 3 header pipes out of flatheads. That's a problem. Another problem is, check out the way that the air has to come out of these valves and over into the cylinder. It's not very efficient. That's why you'll see a lot of guys will cut away down here onto the actual deck of the block to try to ease that travel a little bit. Now, later in the show, we're going to learn more about flatheads and all sorts of ways to hop them up.
Recently, we sent our camera crew to Santa Fe Springs, California to cover the Rat Fink reunion. Now, the younger viewers might not even know what the Rat Fink concept is.
You know, Ed Big Daddy Roth inspired millions of kids back in the 60s with this mix of monsters and hot rodding, and it's come back pretty big over the last 10 years. Let's take a look and see. You'll see what we mean.
In 1959, Ed Roth invited a few friends to hang out. Today, Ed has a whole lot of friends. The Rat Fink reunion calls itself the best custom culture show on the planet. With cool rides, artists, rockabilly bands, good eats, beautiful weather, and Ed Big Daddy Roth, you can see why. Mooneyes Equipment in Santa Fe Springs, California hosts this annual December event. Thousands of fans come from all over the world to party with Ed. The parking lot is jam-packed with cars that are channeled, chopped, decked, filled, slammed, and some that are just beyond description. Also on display were some of Dean Moon's legendary dragsters and streamliners. We caught up with the legend himself, Ed Big Daddy Roth.
In 1960, it started just inviting my friends, and then every year the friend would bring a friend, just like a pyramid club, you know. Well, they got the hot rods, which is pre, let's say 36, and then you have the 29s that have the four-banger engines in them yet. Then you have the Harley guys, and then you have the guys with the fuel-injected engines in their 57 Chevys, and then you have the low riders that go up and down. Rat Fink, that's just a worldwide thing now.
So as you can see, this is a little different type of car show. You know, our buddy Corey Lee even flew the Rat Fink colors on his funny car last year.
You know what the kids liked about it most is that it had thick metal flake in the flames. I mean, that's got style that Roth would like.
It's all groovy. Let's take a look at some rides.
Now, speaking of flames, Californians are very particular when it comes to their flames, and this 37 did it right.
Oh yeah, they'll rake you over the coals if they don't like your flames.
You know, it's not very often that you see a fenderless car of this type. It's got kind of a drag style when you do it. It almost reminds you of like a Fiat Topolino, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's got the sprint car steering wheel. You're kind of mixing a little bit, but it's a driver. I mean, a small block Chevrolet right out of a 69 Camaro. It's a driver.
Yeah, they have a good time at the show. Now, check this out. This is really what's got a lot of the older guys in the rodding crowd kind of upset about what the kids are doing, because you can't say that Eric James Madrid, who brought this car there, drove this thing to the show. He might have, but it was probably a scary ride.
Well, yeah, no floorboards. I mean, chicken wire, a beer can for a collector. It's a real rat ride. You know?
And he even told us, I mean, the top speed on this thing, 50 miles an hour. That's as fast as I'd want to go in it.
Yeah, I mean, Flintstones were more technologically advanced.
Now, check out what Bobby Flores brought. 66 Chevy Impala, lowrider. I mean, God, it's got a bunch of candy in it. I mean, that's a pretty good example of the scene around Santa Fe Springs.
Well, that's the cool thing about Rat Fink. I mean, it's just not about character cars. I mean, even though I guess you can consider this one, I mean, with the low stance, hydraulics, I mean, these things are actually really wild.
You know what thing that's cool about a hydraulic car like this? Do you know how many batteries it takes to run this thing? I'll bet you the whole trunk's filled with them.
Check this out, man. Can you imagine pulling up to the red light in Cleveland, Ohio with this thing?
In fact, we ought to get you a lowrider. You could sing Cheech and Chong again out the window. Now, don't you agree? We need to get Skuza into a lowrider. Something with front and back and side to side. What car could you convert into a lowrider that you'd be seen in?
Well, if I wanted to be different, I'd do a Gremlin.
He'd be different. We'll be right back.
Still to come on popular hot rodding television, we'll learn more about flathead V8s, and we'll get an up-close look at this '29 Ford Rat Rod. Stay tuned.
Dude, you look like Brian Deegan in the Metal Militia. Oh. Hey, welcome back to PHR TV. Today we're talking flatheads, and on the pad here today, we have a primo example of where you'll find them, a 32 Ford Highboy Roadster. Now, the coolest thing about rodding today is that it's become acceptable to mix genres. In other words, you could take a nice vintage piece like this, incorporate some technology, and you come up with a better driving car. Now, under the hood, we have vintage horsepower here. How about a 46 Ford Flathead? Now, the car owner's chosen Edelbrock aluminum aftermarket heads, Holley carburation, but this is a typical setup of what you'll see on a period car like this.
Our friends at Cornhusker Rod & Custom brought one of their chassis with the body off so we can see just how cool these period pieces really are. Now, the engine between the frame rails, it's got 8-to-1 compression, so it makes pretty good power. Original Flatheads had 6-to-1. That's probably why they weren't very powerful. Now, when you think about compression, you think of detonation. And you get too much detonation like these things can get, they'll rob you of power. And Dean's dad, he's got a Flathead with 8-to-1. At 146 degrees, just running around, the thing runs perfect. But at 148 degrees, it detonates like crazy, robs it of power, and that's because of the combustion chamber in these Flatheads. Take a look at this. You'll see more about how it works.
Early post-war hot rodders loved the Ford Flathead V8. It was inexpensive, ubiquitous, and made a good platform for modifications. As we mentioned earlier, the Flatheads are also known as L-heads because of their L-shaped combustion chamber. Modern overhead valve designs are more efficient, but the Flathead does have a few advantages. Because of its simple design and lack of push rods and rocker arms, the Flathead doesn't create as much internal friction. Less friction means less horsepower being wasted on opening and closing the valves. There are two basic combustion chamber configurations for Flatheads: the low compression non-turbulent design and the higher compression squish type used on the V8. The non-turbulent design has one large combustion chamber area which allows a high volume of air-fuel mixture to enter. The major drawback is this design does not allow for high compression ratios. Ford used this non-turbulent design on the 4-cylinder Model A engine, which had a compression ratio of about 4-to-1. The squish-type combustion chamber design was used on the Flathead V8. It reduced the overall volume of the combustion chamber by reducing the area above the piston, which created higher compression ratios. The early Flathead V8 had ratios of about 6-to-1. The squish-type design has relatively efficient combustion because high-velocity turbulent flow characteristics are created by valve location and the tapered head over the piston.
Now let's look at some aftermarket parts for these Flatheads. Let's say you want to bolt on a set of maybe Edelbrock heads or these Offenhauser heads, get to 8-to-1 compression, but not have detonation. A trick way to do it is with electronic fuel injection. Believe it or not, it comes from Australia. Cornhusker's got it for about $2,500, and it'll solve your problem right there. Now you're also probably thinking, what's this going to cost and how much power am I going to make? You can make, let's say 250 horsepower from anywhere between $4,000 and $7,000.
Now, Cam brings up a pretty good point. EFI is a good way to kind of curb the detonation, but you know what? It's not going to cure it entirely. Now, even if you're going to use aftermarket heads like Edelbrock or this Offie head, you're still going to want to do some work in there. Eliminate a lot of these hot spots, particularly around the spark plugs. Now, there's guys around the country that actually have CNC programs. I know CNC and Flathead, it's like jumbo shrimp or pork and beans. It should really be called beans and a little chunk of fat. But anyway. Yeah, eliminate these hot spots. They also have programs that actually make a better transition from the combustion chamber over to the actual cylinder, so you can get a little bit better flow there. Now, there's all kinds of parts available. New goodies for your Flathead. I mean, trick exhaust manifolds, trick starters that are already wired for 12 volt. They're actually gear reduction, so you have higher torque. Intake manifolds like this typical setup here, like we saw in the Deuce on the set, but the best, blowers. I mean, how else can you add 100 horsepower instantly to your Flathead? I don't know. There is no way. Now, guys in the 50s and the 60s that put McCullough or Scott's blowers on their rides, well, you know, they had to fabricate their whole drive unit. Well, companies like Roadrunner Engineering in Albuquerque, New Mexico, make it real easy. They got a kit for about $2,500, give or take a few hundred, and the thing bolts right on. You could add 100 horsepower in an afternoon. Now, speaking of cool parts, let's take a look at this week's rodding marketplace.
Georgia Marketing introduces its new line of road racing collectibles. GMP has been chosen as the official manufacturer of Penske Authentic Die-Cast collectibles for Penske Racing. These 1/18th die-cast scale cars are limited edition and serialized. Look for our new McLaren Can-Am series later this year. For more information on these and many other great collectibles, call or visit our website. Grundy Worldwide Collector Vehicle Insurance for antiques, classics, hot rods, and exotic cars. Innovators of agreed value coverage with unlimited mileage, no model year limitation, and expert service nationwide. Call us now for an AccuQuote at 800-338-4005 or visit Grundy.com for real-time quotes in all 50 states. Hedman Headers, quality performance exhaust products since the birth of hot rodding. For cars or trucks, Hedman manufactures the largest selection of headers and exhaust products in the industry. From 50-state legal headers to racing headers. Hedman Headers fit better, last longer, and work harder under your hood. Call for your free Hedman Header catalog or visit them at Hedman.com.
Let's continue our nostalgia episode with our car feature this week. A really good representation of what used to go on in hot rodding and finally is going on again.
That's right. Our buddy Rob Fortier from California put together a piece that really defines an era and really shows us what hot rodding was all about. Let's take a look.
Great place to do it, too, right in front of the NHRA Motorsports Museum. And our PHR video valet for the week, Shelly, she fits, too.
You got that right. Now, when it came for paint and time to choose color of paint, you know what he chose? Rhode Island Red Oxide.
That'd be primer to the rest of us, team. Look at a 32 grill, Wheel Vintiques 15s. What this car really represents is what hot rods were all about in the first place, is different parts of cars. It doesn't matter what year it's from, as long as it all comes together. I mean, heck, you get it from where you can get it. That's what a hot rod really is.
That's right. I mean, it was all about performance. Whatever worked best, that's what you bolted on the car. Now, when you look at this car, everything has a function. There's no real glitz or glamour to it. I mean, look at the rust hole in the thing. That's what this thing is all about. It's about defining an era. Even inside the trunk, everything is functional. That's a 14-gallon spun aluminum moon tank. You might have saw Jim Dunn's Mooneyes car. That's the same company.
Absolutely. Now, the injection on this thing, or actually the Strombergs, we should say, is a big period part of what makes these cars look a certain way. What he's done here is taken a Wyand Dragstar log-style manifold with 6 Stromberg 97s, Heliarc stainless fuel line, Heim joint linkage, and those snorkel-style scoops. It's built by a guy named Charlie Price at Vintage Speed in Vero Beach, Florida. It's a pretty cool setup.
Now, when you hear Strombergs, you immediately think of a flathead. Well, you know what Rob chose was a 66 Buick Nailhead, 425 cubic inches. This engine actually came out of a Riviera.
They put a small block in the Riviera and put this one in someplace cool. Now, what's cool about the interior in this thing, get a look at that seat. That was actually a Mexican blanket that Rob's parents had before he was born. Rob took the blanket to a guy named Dan Butler in Laguna Beach, who's an upholsterer, and tucked the thing just right so it actually looks like real upholstery. Now here comes Rob. Look, he's proud. And she's got more tattoos than he does, doesn't she, Dean?
And who would have thunk it?
Yeah, he's actually got a lot. You know, Rob, you see that Street Rodder shirt he's wearing. Rob's is an associate editor for Street Rodder, and he and I have hung around for quite a few years. And it's really cool that he's finally getting his just due, because before this scene was necessarily cool, Rob was putting these cars together.
You know, I said that he's our buddy, and let me tell you why. Because this guy was after my own heart. I went out to LA to race in Pomona. Rob sets us up with backstage passes for Social V, after party for Social V. Then on top of that, takes us back to his house, which is like a mini museum of sorts, and feeds us Captain and Coke all night. I mean, this is my kind of guy.
Yeah, that sounds like a heck of a cocktail. Now check that out. One of the coolest parts of this car, open exhaust.
Yeah, I mean, with that 66 Nailhead, I mean, it's kind of a different sound.
Now, you know, these cars that you would think, oh, well, you know, is that thing exactly road legal? Hey, it's a 29. It doesn't need seat belts and all that. But Rob does put it in there. I mean, he's got some safety for it.
It smokes the tires quite nicely, too. I mean, it's light. That's the thing about these cars. I mean, what does that thing weigh? 1,900 pounds?
What a perfect place to show off Rob Fortier's car. The NHRA Motorsports Museum. It's a period piece.
That thing belongs in there. I'll tell you, man, feed me those vanilla Cokes all night, introduce me to Mike Ness from Social Distortion. Rob's got a friend in me for life if he wants it.
Good thing I live down the street. I get to go get that stuff all the time.
We'll be right back. That was a great show, too.
More of popular hot rodding television after this.
Oh, Superman.
Skuza, you are never going to catch me. Watch the Superman.
Yeah, but man, look at all the sick
perfect.
moves I'm
Ouch,
doing.
ouch. That was the tent in the tree that I hit.
Dude, watch this sick here. Oh.
Yeah, there's something
he's
sick
down.
about it. Hey, welcome back. Hopefully you had some fun on our nostalgia episode today and maybe learned something about how flatheads work and maybe how to make them go fast.
Well, I know we've done one thing, and we've probably excited a lot of the old school rodders, but what I'm hoping we've done is encourage the younger guys to build their own flatheads.
I think we did. We'll see you next week, but in the meantime, little ATV Off-Road Fury PlayStation 2, biggest air in the business.
Let's race. Dude, watch this sick air.
Oh, perfect Superman watch. I can do the knack-knack.
Oh, not enough air.
Next week on Popular Hot Rodding Television, Cam and Dean explain the secrets of selecting the right air filter and exhaust system for your car. The action in the heavy street class is hot and furious at the Orlando Street Nationals. And what makes this '69 Camaro one of the best G machines in the country? Tune in and find out. Subscribe to Popular Hot Rodding Magazine today, your source for the rod and performance scene. Every issue is packed with how-to articles, killer feature cars, engine build-ups, and much more. Order now, and you'll receive the latest issue of Popular Hot Rodding absolutely free. If you like what you see, you'll pay only $9.97 for 11 more issues. That's less than $1 per copy. America's performance publication, Popular Hot Rodding. Don't wait. Get your free issue by calling 877-9-RODDER now. If you'd like more information on Popular Hot Rodding Television and the products presented on the show, visit PHRTV.com.